And I just would urge you not to stress getting negative feedback. But that said, if you do get a negative feedback, there are options you can take to get that negative feedback removed. That's the option that I use. That's the option I recommend you use. Hey, I picked up some pretty cool stuff at garage sales this week. Check this out. First up is this Ember self-heating coffee mug I paid $5 at a garage sale for. Brand new in the box, but I'm keeping it for myself. These Redhead Gore-Tex boots I bought for $5 at a garage sale. Should go for about $45 plus shipping after they're cleaned. And another pair of boots here. These are only $2. They're steel toe Red Wings, but pretty scuffed up. But even so, they'll still go for about $45 once I clean them. This Samsung video camera was brand new in the box. Open box, but still $125 I've got it listed for. I paid $5 at a garage sale. And finally, this Pyrex Amish butter print Cinderella bowl. I paid up $10 for it, a little bit much. It's going for about $35 plus shipping. All right, let's jump into some viewer questions. The story behind it asks, do you know why eBay lets you send offers when someone simply views an item versus when they watch it? I seem to get the send offer option when there are no watchers. Yeah, so that's definitely a thing. I've definitely noticed it. It is possible to send offers to people even if they have not watched your item, and sometimes when they've just looked at the item. The short answer is eBay's going to do whatever they can to try to get a sale to happen, and they are using someone just looking at your listing as positive intent that they may be interested in buying it, and then allowing you to send offers out to them. And so you'll notice sometime as a seller, when you're doing research on comps, you'll get offers from other sellers on things that you're trying to sell also. That's what's going on here. There's just, eBay, it's not every time you look at an item, but sometimes when you look at an item, eBay decides that you may have more interest in buying it and makes you eligible to receive an offer from a seller. David asks, hey, love your content. Thank you. I've noticed you stay away from art glass, vases, crystal, etc. Is this intentional? If so, why? Thanks, David. I do stay away from that type of stuff, not on purpose necessarily. It's just not a category of things I know a whole lot about, and I typically don't buy things that I don't know much about. If I have the opportunity to learn about something, I will use that opportunity to buy it and learn more about it, but it's just not a category of things that I'm super familiar with, and it's not something I typically go to directly. And so you'll find a few things here and there in my inventory that I just happen across and I'll do the research on and buy, but it's just not something I'm interested in. And if you're a new reseller out there looking to get started, I would recommend you really start with what you know and don't try to jump into a category that you know nothing about. You're going to have more success if you start in categories that you're familiar with or that you're passionate about, and it's going to be easier to get your start in that way. All right, let's jump into my sales for the week. Just as a reminder, I'm going to be answering more viewer questions sprinkled throughout these top 10 sales, so stick around if you want to see the answers to those. And as always, if you have a question for me, just leave it down below and I will answer it in next week's video. All right, looks like for the week, I've got a gross income of $1,124 and a net income of $578. That's a 52% net profit margin and an 894% ROI. Scrolling down here, looks like I had 46 new listings. My goal is 35 per week, and so 46 is above my goal. Feeling pretty good about that, but only 27 sales. So sales weren't as high as I would have hoped this week, but still not bad. Average time to sell is 2 months, and I spent a total of $234 on new inventory over the past 7 days. Coming in at number 10 is this Google Nest thermostat. Bought this at a garage sale just this past week, and it sold in less than 6 hours. So a very quick sale for $39.98. I paid $5 for it at this garage sale. I had a net return of $22.97 for the 10th best flip of the week. This is kind of my bread and butter stuff. I like to buy electronics. I know that the Google Nest thermostats can be pretty high value. This one was lower than I was expecting it to be, but at a $5 price point, it was still a no-brainer to pick up, and it sold in less than 6 hours. Speaking of art glass, coming in at number 9 is this set of 5 hand-blown lemons. My wife actually picked this one up. I didn't pick this up, but it was at a garage sale for $3 about 3 weeks ago. It sold for $44.98 in total. Our net return for the 9th best flip was $29.78. So again, if I saw these laying there, I didn't, my wife did, but even if I saw them, I probably wouldn't have picked them up. I just wouldn't have known whether they had any value at all. But my wife saw them. She knows more about this type of thing than I do, and she picked them up, and they sold pretty quickly, less than 3 weeks for our 9th best flip of the week. These really weren't too bad to ship either. You just make sure that you wrap each item individually and make sure there's enough space in the box to be able to put padding in between all of them, and make sure when it's all packed up and taped up, you kind of give it the shake test and make sure nothing's moving around, and you should be good to go. For extra delicate things, you may consider putting each individual item in a small box wrapped, and then put those small boxes in a larger box with some void fill around it. That's if you want to be extra careful. But we didn't do that in this situation, and they should make it there just fine. All right, Jen Goodman asks, my son and I watch your videos every week, and it's helped us so much. That's great. From your experience, do you think the time when you list things matter? I'm a night owl, so I post a lot around midnight. Should I wait to post until a certain window of time? Thank you. Good question. When should I actually post my items? I advise a lot about listing consistently and regularly every single day. I don't think the timing matters a whole lot as long as you're listing as a buy it now. I would just get them up whenever. If you really want to, though, you can schedule your listings for the future. eBay has an option where you can select right near the pricing in the list screen where you can schedule something into the future. If you don't want to publish it right away when you're listing it at midnight and you want to wait until the morning, you can do that. It's totally free to do, but you don't have to. You can list it anytime. The only time you really do want to pay attention to when you list it is if you're doing an auction. And a couple of y'all pointed this out in the comments as well. Since auctions get the most attention right towards the end, posting your auction to end at 2 a.m., probably not the best idea. You're probably only going to get action from people who have set up bots to bid for them. So if you're using an auction, you really should be setting it to end during a much more common time when people are awake and at their computers. But generally speaking, for buy it nows, just post it whenever. Coming in at number 8 is this cool brand engineered hoodie. Got this at a Salvation Army just about 4 days ago. I paid $8 and it sold for $51.98 for the 8th best flip of the week. That's a $31.22 net return. Cool is a really good brand to look out for. I'll pop the logo up on the screen, so if you see it out when you're sourcing, make sure you pick it up. I've never bought a cool piece that didn't sell in like less than a week at full asking price, even in the used category. So it's a really good brand to look out for. This one was really valuable. I can't believe it sold for $50, but a $31 net return for the 8th best flip of the week. Coming in at number 7 is this mocha pot that I got at a Salvation Army for $5. It sold in 10 months, so it took a long time to find the right buyer, but it sold for $49.98, and the net return was $31.41 for the 7th best flip of the week. Alessandro Medini, he's an architect who passed away a couple years ago. When I saw this at the thrift store, I knew it just looked different than other pieces there. It was new in the box, and it was made in Italy, and for $5, is that what I paid? Yeah, $5. I knew it was going to be a pretty good buy. It took 10 months to sell. I don't mind when things take a long time to sell. I've got a pretty large space for holding my inventory, and so I can sit on things for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months in this case, and really have no issues. It's kind of tucked away in a basement. If you live in an apartment, for example, and you're storing stuff in your closet, you may not want to buy things that are going to take 10 months to sell. But personally, I don't mind, and I'm happy to get it out the door for the 7th best flip of the week. Woodsmoke asks, hey Justin, I'm only getting 1 sale a day. How do I get more? Good question. Well, the only way to get more sales is to list more stuff. And you can't just list anything. You have to list things that are in demand and that people are actually going to buy. And so there's really no tricks here. A lot of people like to talk about the algorithm and how to trick it and how to beat it and all this stuff. The best way to beat it is to just list good stuff. List things that are in high demand that buyers want to buy. You can check things like demand and supply by checking active listings and sold listings and figuring out the sell-through rate. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how to do that here. I got a ton of other videos that do just that I will link up top and down below. But that's the short answer. If you want more sales, you got to list more stuff, and you can't just list any old thing. You got to list things that people want to buy. The more items you have for sale that are in high demand, the more sales you're going to get. It's really that simple. Coming in at number 6 is another pickup from that same Salvation Army for $5. It is a brand new Marvel backpack here that sold for $49.98. It took 8 months to sell, but the net return was $31.62 for the 6th best flip of the week. I don't know much about Marvel, but a new with tags bag like this with a Marvel logo on it, it's going to be a pretty good bet. Kind of surprising it did go for $50 though. That's a pretty good return on that. 632% ROI and a 63% net profit margin. What was that? The 5th best flip of the week? That was the 6th best flip of the week. Coming in at number 5 is this new in box Altec Lansing computer speakers. If you're in your 30s or 40s like I am, you may remember the brand Altec Lansing. I'm sure it's still a brand today, but it was a very popular brand in the 90s and early 2000s for computer peripherals like speakers like this. And so I saw this at a Goodwill for $11. They were new in the box. I knew it was going to be a pretty good buy. I did think it was going to take a long time to sell based on the sell-through rate, but it actually sold a lot quicker. It looks like it went in 2 months here for $59.98. I made $31.82 for the 5th best flip of the week on these Altec Lansing GS100 satellite speakers. A regular guy asks, curious, clothing, high return rate, is it worth pursuing? I've been a hard item collectible antique guy for over 40 years as a hobby. Now, as a senior citizen, I have to look at increasing my monthly income. So clothing, high return rate, Sometimes clothing can produce a higher return rate than other items. I sell a decent amount of clothing. Probably 40% of my items are clothing items. My return rate hovers right around 3%, which I'm happy with. I don't think that's too bad. And so you ask if it's worth pursuing. That's really a personal question. You know, there's thousands of resellers out there making a ton of money off of clothing alone, but you really have to want to do it. Clothing can be a slog to source and to list. It's super easy to ship. That's the fortunate thing. But all the other parts of the process can be more difficult with clothing. And so if you have no real interest in sourcing for clothing, I would recommend you not pursue that as a category to sell on. It may not be worth the hassle of doing, but to find success on eBay, especially early on, you really want to focus on the things that you know the most about and that you're somewhat passionate about, and you're not going to get annoyed by having to source and list it. And so I would really ask yourself whether clothing is something that you want to actually try to buy and sell. And if you find yourself getting annoyed trying to do it, it's probably not worth it, because there's other categories that you may have more interest in that'll make just as much money and that you won't hate doing. And so it's really kind of up to you. But yes, the money is definitely there. You have to learn the brands, you have to learn the styles. And assuming you do that, there's tons of inventory out there to be had and lots of good money to be made. Coming in at number 4 is this vintage Little Playmates Disney Castle. I bought this at the first garage sale of the season this year. It looks like 3 months is the time to sell, but it sold for $84.98. That's $69.99 plus $15 in shipping. I paid $5 at that garage sale, and the net return for the fourth best flip of the week was $37.77. I always keep an eye out for vintage Disney items. Not all of them are going to be good, but a lot of them are. In this case, I knew it was going to be okay and worth the gamble at $5. The biggest challenge with something like this is knowing whether all the pieces are there. I don't sit down at a garage sale and count everything, so I just took the gamble at $5, and this was incomplete. It was missing just a few of the people on it. That's okay, though. I labeled it as mostly complete, and it sold for a really good amount here. Coming in at number 3 is this vintage Flaming Lips Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots tour shirt. I got this one from my brother. I don't think he knew that it had as much value as it did, but it sold for $60 in 7 months, and my net return for the third best flip of the week was $46.84 for this Flaming Lips tour t-shirt. It's not often I sell a t-shirt for this much money. In fact, I wonder what the most expensive t-shirt I've ever sold is. That's a good question. Let's take a look. Let's see. I'll just look here for shirt and sort by net return in the opposite direction. Okay, so the best shirt I've ever sold is this New with Tags Countdown to Extinction, Walt Disney World t-shirt. I sold it for $159.99. I bought it at Salvation Army for $5. That's the best t-shirt I've ever sold. Andrea asks, do you leave feedback for a buyer after they pay or after the 30-day return window is over? I've been leaving it after they pay, but then I think I just got scammed by a buyer. So good question about when you should leave feedback for your buyers. In fact, I'm going to use this opportunity to talk through a couple of feedback tricks that every seller should know, starting with automating your feedback. When I first started selling, I would just leave feedback manually when someone bought an item from me. I would hop in there and say, prompt payment, good buyer, all that good stuff. But the first time I contacted eBay to figure out a potential scam, the first thing that the eBay representative asked me was, well, you left positive feedback for the buyer. And so I had already left feedback for the buyer. It turned out to be a problem buyer, and that positive feedback was brought up by the eBay representative asking why I put that if I was happy with the transaction. And so at that point, I learned that you can actually automate your feedback on eBay. And so you don't have to leave it manually, which is nice, but you can also automate it in a way that chooses when to leave that feedback. I don't actually wait until the 30-day return window is open. That's not a bad idea, but there's no way to automate it in that way, and that would be too difficult to manage with hundreds of orders every month. But I do automate my feedback in a different way that eBay allows you to, and I want to show you that here. If you go into your seller dashboard and go into preferences, you have an option at the top here to automate feedback. You're going to hit edit, and you can check this box to automatically leave positive feedback either after the buyer has paid for the item or after the buyer has paid for the item and left me a positive feedback. That's the option that I use. That's the option I recommend you use. So that means you don't leave feedback for your buyers on eBay automatically until they leave you a positive feedback. And so by doing this, this allows you to wait to send your feedback to your buyer until after they've given you feedback, which signals that they're happy with the order. You can also edit your stored comments. And so you can leave a number of different comments on here and eBay will just cycle through randomly randomly. I just use one comment only. My feedback for all my buyers always says, great buyer with excellent taste. Thank you for your business. I use this line because one time I bought some shirt, I can't remember, some piece of clothing off of eBay. And I remember the seller left me feedback that said I had excellent taste. And I was like, oh, really? Wow, thank you. It just made me feel good. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make that my feedback for all of my buyers as well. I'm going to tell them they have excellent taste. It works for most items. It's a little weird when someone buys like a gasket off of you or something that really has nothing to do with their taste. But so that's the first trick, automate your feedback. The second trick I want to show you is that as a seller, you have the ability to check the feedback that your potential buyer leaves other sellers. And so this is really helpful if you receive a best offer, or if someone's asking you questions about an item that you have listed and they're kind of giving you mixed signals, or you're kind of unsure of whether you would want this person to buy your item, you can actually look at the feedback that they have left for other sellers. The way you do that is you go into their profile. I'm just going to use my profile right here on eBay, so I don't have to dox anyone out there. This is my profile right here. Look at that, 2222. That's great. But what you do is once you go to their profile right here, you can scroll down and there's a tab here that says left for others. And again, you're going to see just all of my repeated great buyer with excellent taste left for others. But sometimes you might check this for a potential buyer and see that they've left other sellers a bunch of negative feedback. And that's your signal to not accept a best offer or to end the conversation and block that buyer so that they can't buy your item. I don't do this all that often. Truthfully, when you have a lot of items for sale and you sell a lot of stuff, it becomes very difficult to check every single potential buyer who sends you an offer or sends you a message. But if I get a little spidey sense that this buyer might be problematic, I'll pop in there, I'll check their feedback left for others and see if it's going to be an issue. The third trick is how you can request to have feedback removed. Before I jump into this, you've heard me say this on the channel before, negative feedback as a seller really doesn't matter all that much if you get it. As long as you're a reputable seller, you're not trying to scam people, as long as you describe your items well and you ship on time and you pack your things well. If you sell enough things on eBay, you're eventually going to get some negative feedback. You can't make every buyer happy. And I just would urge you not to stress getting negative feedback. But that said, if you do get a negative feedback, there are options you can take to get that negative feedback removed. The first is this request assistance interface. I'll link this in the description down below, but there's a button here that says request to remove feedback. You can do that. I don't have any negative feedback pending here, so I can't actually request to have one removed, but that will send it to eBay representatives and they'll review it and see. And there's all sorts of reasons why negative feedback can be removed. So for example, if a buyer is using negative feedback as extortion, if they say you need to do this or else I will give you negative feedback, you can have that negative feedback removed if they do it, because they're extorting services from you with the threat of negative feedback. There's all sorts of other reasons. You should check the eBay policies. Some people have had more luck reaching out to eBay on Facebook, the eBay Facebook business page. I've never done that. I've heard people have had success doing that. Again, if I get a negative feedback, I just don't really sweat it. I don't spend a whole bunch of time trying to get it removed. Coming in at number 2 is this JVC VCR. I bought this at a St. Vincent de Paul for only $4. It was sort of crazy because it had the VCR, obviously, and the remote. It also had this cable eye, which I think was like a wire that you could plug in to extend the remote's visibility, so you could put the VCR tucked away in a cabinet and still be able to use the remote. Usually I don't buy VCRs at thrift stores because they're not treated very well, but this one was only $4, so it felt like it was worth the gamble, and it was just in really good condition. Turns out it all worked just great. It took 21 days to sell for $74.98, the second best flip of the week, net return of $49.37. VCRs are one of my favorite things to buy and sell. Most people, especially at garage sales, just don't know that they still have value. The reason that they have value, though, is they don't make new ones anymore. And so the only place to get VCRs are on the secondary market, like on eBay, and they can go for some really good money. And typically, especially at garage sales, you can source them for $5. Thrift stores have kind of caught on. Sometimes they charge up, but they also just don't get treated very well at a thrift store. And I found that they often are broken when I buy them from there. So I typically don't buy them from thrift stores anymore. Coming in at number 1 here is this Adidas Liverpool soccer jersey. I got this at a garage sale for $5, I think. Yeah, $5. It sold for $76.98 for the best flip of the week. That's a $55.24 net return. So this was a really cool soccer jersey. I actually bought 3 other ones from this same garage sale. This one was the best of the bunch, though. And yeah, it sold pretty quickly. This is one of my favorite categories to buy, is soccer jerseys in particular. Anytime I see a soccer jersey, as long as it has kind of a big brand name on it, like Adidas or Umbro or Nike, Puma, things like that, I always pick it up, and generally they're going to be worth a decent amount of money, especially if they are vintage. This one was not quite vintage, only 2009, so about 5 more years until it's considered vintage, but still a really good pickup and a really good sell for the best flip of the week, $55.24 and an 1100% ROI. Let's take a look at some of the worst flips of the week. Looks like the worst one here is a Harry Potter book that I bought for $1 and sold for $10.50 and got a net return of $2.72. Also, it looks like a little vintage Ninja Turtles toy that I bought for $1 and sold for $14 and got a $6.64% net return. What else? This vintage Starbucks tumbler. This thing I actually thought was going to do a lot better. This was pretty cool, from 1998, this Starbucks tumbler here, but it only sold for $16.98. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you missed last week's episode, click here to watch it now. If you like these videos, I do them every week, so hit that subscribe button and join me next Monday. Thanks, and see you soon.